The year was 1980. It was a time when the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota was bustling with life. Yet beneath the surface, a sense of unease was beginning to take hold. The city of Minneapolis, Minnesota was gripped by fear. The streets that were once filled with the laughter of children and the chatter of neighbors now echoed with an eerie silence as night fell. People hurried home, casting nervous glances over their shoulders, afraid of the shadows that seemed to grow longer with each passing day. A killer stalked the night, his weapon of choice, a hammer or a concrete block, leaving a trail of blood and terror. The brutality of his attacks was matched only by their randomness, making everyone a potential target. The police were baffled, and the community was paralyzed with fear, wondering who would be next. But it was his voice, a high-pitched, whimpering plea for help, that truly chilled the city to the bone. Each time he called the police to report his own crimes, his voice was filled with a disturbing mix of remorse and satisfaction. It was as if he was both the victim and the perpetrator, a twisted duality that left everyone on edge. He was dubbed the weepy-voiced killer, and his reign of terror would forever be etched in the city's memory. The media coverage was relentless, with headlines screaming of the latest attack and the haunting voice that followed. The name weepy-voiced killer became synonymous with fear, a ghostly presence that loomed over the city. Paul Michael Stephanie, the man behind the chilling moniker, was no hardened criminal. He was a man with a troubled past, struggling with inner demons that few could see. His outward appearance was that of an ordinary citizen, blending seamlessly into the fabric of society. He was a seemingly ordinary man, working as a hospital orderly. His colleagues knew him as a quiet, unassuming individual, someone who did his job without drawing much attention. Yet behind this facade of normalcy, a dark and twisted psyche was brewing, one that would soon erupt in a series of horrifying acts. Yet, beneath the facade of normalcy, lurked a dark and twisted psyche, driven by a need for power and control that would manifest in horrifying acts of violence. His attacks were not just physical but psychological, leaving a lasting scar on the community. The weepy-voiced killer's legacy is a grim reminder of the darkness that can hide behind the most ordinary of masks. Born in 1944, Paul Michael Stephanie's early life was marked by instability. A tumultuous relationship with his father and a perceived lack of affection from his mother cast a long shadow over his formative years. Bedwetting and pyromania in his youth hinted at deeper psychological disturbances. Some experts believe these early experiences contributed to his later crimes. The feeling of powerlessness in his childhood may have fueled a need to exert control over others, often in the most brutal and terrifying ways. While this provides a possible explanation, it does not excuse the horrific acts he would go on to commit. The weepy-voiced killer's reign of terror began on New Year's Eve 1980. His first known victim was Karen Potak, a young woman brutally murdered in her apartment. The savagery of the attack, coupled with the lack of a clear motive, sent shockwaves through the city. The killer didn't stop there. Over the next few months, he would claim the lives of two more young women, Kimberly Compton and Kathleen Greening. Each attack was more brazen than the last, escalating in both brutality and the killer's apparent need to toy with authorities. What truly set this case apart were the phone calls. They were unlike anything the police had ever encountered before, a haunting reminder of the killer's presence. After each murder, the killer would contact the police, his voice a high-pitched, desperate plea for help. The calls would come in at odd hours, often in the dead of night, adding to the eerie atmosphere surrounding the case. "Please don't talk to me like I'm a suspect," he'd whimper, his voice trembling with what sounded like remorse and fear. "I'm so afraid." The tone of his voice was so convincing that it left even the most seasoned detectives questioning their instincts. He even provided cryptic clues about the murders, adding a layer of chilling gamesmanship to his crimes. These clues were often riddles or obscure references that took time to decipher, keeping the police on edge and the public in a state of constant fear. These calls were more than just confessions. They were a twisted form of communication, a desperate cry for attention from a deeply disturbed individual. Each call seemed to be a performance, meticulously planned to evoke a specific reaction from the police and the media. The killer seemed to crave the notoriety, feeding off the fear that gripped the city. His calls became a macabre ritual, a way to assert his dominance and control over the narrative. The city was held hostage by the sound of his voice, each call a reminder that he was still out there, watching, waiting, and ready to strike again. The police were baffled. The killer's MO was inconsistent, his victims seemingly chosen at random. The only lead they had was the haunting voice on the phone. As the body count rose, so did the pressure on the police department. Finally, a break in the case came from an unexpected source. The killer contacted a local crisis hotline, his voice betraying his identity. A counselor recognized the distinct, high-pitched voice and contacted the authorities. Paul Michael Stephanie was arrested on December 31, 1981, exactly 1 year after his first murder. Section 6 Justice served, trial, imprisonment, and death. Stephanie's trial was a media spectacle. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence, including the chilling phone calls and eyewitness accounts. Despite his attempts to plead insanity, the jury found him guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to life in prison. However, his time behind bars was cut short. In 1998, while incarcerated, Stephanie died from complications of diabetes. His death, while bringing a sense of finality, did little to heal the wounds left by his crimes. Section 7. Scars on a City, the Legacy of the Weepy-Voiced Killer. This chapter delves into the chilling story of a man whose voice, filled with remorse and desperation, became synonymous with fear and tragedy in Minneapolis. The weepy-voiced killer's reign of terror left an indelible mark on Minneapolis. His calls to 911, filled with sobs and pleas for forgiveness, sent shivers down the spines of residents. Each call was a grim reminder that the killer was still out there, lurking in the shadows. The city that once prided itself on its safety was now haunted by the specter of a killer who walked among them. The once bustling streets became deserted at night, as fear gripped the hearts of the citizens. Parents held their children closer, and the community's sense of security was shattered. The case sparked widespread fear and mistrust, forever changing the city's landscape. Law enforcement was under immense pressure to catch the killer, and the media coverage only heightened the public's anxiety. The police worked tirelessly, but the killer's ability to evade capture only added to the growing sense of dread. Even today, the case serves as a stark reminder of the vulnerability of life and the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary individuals. The memorials scattered throughout the city stand as a testament to the lives lost and the pain endured by the community. The victims' families continue to grapple with the loss of their loved ones, their lives forever altered by the tragedy. The community too has been forever changed, with the memory of the weepy-voiced killer serving as a somber reminder of the fragility of peace and the ever-present potential for darkness in the human soul. Section 8. Inside the Mind of a Killer, Psychological Profile. Paul Michael Stephanie's case continues to fascinate and perplex criminologists. His seemingly normal life juxtaposed with the brutality of his crimes raises questions about the nature of evil and the motivations behind such senseless violence. Some experts point to his troubled childhood and possible personality disorders as contributing factors. Others believe his crimes were driven by a lust for power and control, a twisted need to dominate and instill fear in others. Section 9. Lessons learned, the importance of profiling and victim advocacy. The case of the weepy-voiced killer underscored the importance of criminal profiling in law enforcement. The unique nature of the killer's communication with the police, coupled with the psychological insights gleaned from his behavior, ultimately played a crucial role in his capture. Moreover, the case highlighted the need for greater support and advocacy for victims of violent crime. The trauma inflicted on the victims' families and the community at large emphasized the importance of providing resources and support to help them cope with the aftermath of such tragedies.